I have this desire to be disgustingly intelligent. I didn't coin that phrase. Like most things, it seems, I got it from some TikTok or Tumblr post or whatever. My roommate thinks it's a weird way to put it, but I like it. I want to be smart in the way that is so obnoxious, but you also can't help but admire. The kind of intelligent that makes you feel like every sentence is a line from a groundbreaking essay or revolutionary novel. The kind of person that is the living embodiment of Dead Poet Society, or the aestheticized version of Secret History, the version that ignores the entire point of the book as a critique of academia and aestheticizing it. I suppose I want to be the kind of person my AP Lang teacher was. Every time I talked to him, I felt like I was being bestowed with ancient wisdom, the disciples at Jesus' feet. That's a bit dramatic, but still. When I graduated, he gave me 2 books, a literal gift of knowledge, if you will, and he wrote me a card. I found it tucked in one of the books while I was rereading it for this. It was some well wishes and then maintain and nourish your curiosity about the world. Pretty standard stuff, but from him it meant a lot, still means a lot. And he gave me a pretty solid start on that mission with gifting me a book on philosophy. One of the other things he said to me that I think about a lot, well, there's a lot of those, but this one in particular, is something about how teenagers will learn something that is fairly standard knowledge and act as though they're discovering the secrets of the universe. Hubris knows no master stronger than the teenage mind. Learning about Socrates has been forcing me to wrestle with that. I know people know Socrates, his ideas were groundbreaking, sure, but several thousand years ago. He's just got such good ideas, though, and I want to tell everyone. It's ironic, though, this desire to show off everything I know about Socrates, because his whole thing was that he was the smartest man in Athens because he knew nothing. True knowledge is recognizing your ignorance, except clearly I can't even do that, even as I agree with the statement. I mean, I'm writing all this as though everything I say hasn't been said by someone else. Perhaps there's a reason the Pythagoreans had to be silent for 7 years before they could become true mathematicians. At the same time, though, how do you truly understand what you've learned if you don't reflect on it? Socratic discussion and all that. The allegory of the cave is another one of those things that made me go, oh my god, everybody needs to hear about this. It's one of, if not the most famous parts of Plato's Republic. It's all about the value of education in philosophy, so I suppose it's fairly fitting in all this. But the idea that everything we know is only a shadow of a representation of reality, I mean, come on. All in all, then, what the prisoners would take for the reality is nothing more than the shadow of those artifacts. I mean, come on. How can you not freak the fuck out over that? Actually, it was interesting because I was listening to this podcast about an Anaxagoras to study for my philosophy final, and they talked about how he believed the universe wasn't mysterious because if everything was in everything else, then all the answers were right there. And I was just amazed that this guy, whose whole purpose it was to contemplate existence, could come to the conclusion that it was so simple. Like, take the Sarah Bakewell quote explaining the philosophy of Franz Brentano? I don't know. Even when I imagine an object that isn't there, my mental structure is still one of aboutness or oneness, which I must say, using my exclusive and entirely unique knowledge about Greek philosophy, sounds remarkably like Aristotle's forms, as does her description of Heidegger's being and how he differentiated, and this is a German word so I'm probably going to butcher it, but Cyanid, which could mean any individual entity from Cyan, or the being that such particular beings, i.e. humans, etc., have. One of the philosophy podcasts I was listening to made a joke about how all philosophers in Athens were seen as either sophists or just plain obnoxious. And I just watched a short film about these kids who are super caught up in philosophy, and it comes up there as well. And I mean, I get it, but also, how can you think about everything for more than 2 seconds and not just respond to it all with what the ever-living fuck? I mean, going back to the cave allegory, we don't even know ourselves, just how we are reflected. I mean, I suppose that's why the prisoners in the cave are dragged into the light. And if someone dragged him by force away from there along the rough, steep upward path and did not let him go until he had dragged him into the light of the sun. One of the commentaries I listened to pointed out how odd it is that Socrates, whose whole thing was that education and philosophy and bettering the soul and all that must be voluntary, he still said the philosopher was dragged. But I suppose it makes sense. I mean, it's hard to stare directly into the face of how much we don't know and think about it and not just run the other way. I mean, that's what half the allegory is about. And when he came into the light, wouldn't he have his eyes filled with sunlight and be unable to see a single one of the things now said to be truly real? I was thinking about all this, and I'm not really sure what prompted the thought, but I realized there were a lot of parallels between the cave allegory and one of my favorite books, Kay Ancrum's The Wicker King. I tried looking it up to see if it was at all intentional, and I don't think it was, but I mean, the parallels are insane, and maybe that just goes to show how thoroughly Greek philosophy is embedded in Western culture. The book follows this guy whose friend claims to be living in a world basically parallel to the real one, and even though the main character can't see any of this, he gets sucked into it all. Over and over, the question is raised of maybe the world Jack, this other guy, the world he's seeing is the real world, not the world everyone else is existing in, until the end when it turns out Jack has a tumor making him see all this, and yet even then they still wonder if the other world was real. Jack is the prisoner taken into the light, and it takes him a while to be able to really see it, but eventually he can see nothing else. The narrator is one of the prisoners left in the cave. In this case, there is someone willing to listen when the one who had seen the sun returns to tell of the world, but no one else will. The prisoners kill the one who saw the sun, the doctors remove Jack's tumor. In any case, once I saw the connection, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'm a little shocked it wasn't intentional. One of the books my Lang teacher gave me was Sarah Bakewell's biography of Montaigne, and I must say it was a truly fitting gift that the man who so embodied the kind of person I wish to be gave me a biography of a man I so relate to and so wish to be. I mean, a man who refers to himself as an unpremeditated and accidental philosopher. Sign me up. Of course, just as with all these other things, I'm not the first person to feel that way about Montaigne, as Bakewell says, yet to read Montaigne is to experience a series of shocks of familiarity, which make the centuries between him and the 21st century reader collapse to nothing. Readers keep seeing themselves in him. And his Pyrrhonian skepticism is perhaps the best answer to my desire for overwhelming intelligence. Ironic, giving Pyrrhonism's entire basis is not to conclude anything. As Bakewell summarizes, how puny is the knowledge of even the most curious person, Montaigne reflected, and how astounding the world by comparison. Montaigne, in accord with Pyrrhonism, argued we can never know anything, therefore we must consider everything, while keeping the understanding that we really can't know anything at the forefront of it all, as to not draw any conclusions. How very Socratic. This philosophy was summed up in the Greek word epeko, the answer to anything, I suspend judgment. Like the Epicureans and skeptics, it was a path to ataraxia, the epeko that makes you laugh and feel better because it frees you from the need to find any definite answer to anything. When the prisoners are first freed, they still cannot see. Even when all the knowledge is available to them, they must adapt to the light. It's not until they adjust to the light that they can draw conclusions about the new reality. As Boethius says, what sort of knowledge is this, which comprehends nothing sure or stable? Bakewell has this description contrasting Montaigne and Descartes of I think, therefore I am fame. In November 1619, Descartes came to his famed conclusion after locking himself in a room to spend an uninterrupted day of thinking. Montaigne, on the other hand, was far more scattered, pacing up and down, pulling books off shelves, getting distracted, mentioning odd thoughts to his servants to help himself remember, and arriving at his best ideas in a heated dinner party discussion with neighbors or while riding in the woods. I think, in writing all this down, I am trying to be Descartes. It's how I picture intelligence embodied, an individual's journey through the mind. But perhaps I should turn to a more Montaignean collaborative approach. For now, to all it I say, a pecco.